Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just jump right into it today, because we are tackling a home improvement issue that is, honestly, incredibly calming, but also incredibly frustrating. Picture this, right? You are finally ready to finish your basement, or maybe you're upgrading that dusty garage floor. But when you pull up the old flooring or look down at the slab, it's just a bumpy, cracked, completely uneven mess. Your dreams of laying down crisp new tile or sleek vinyl flooring instantly hit a roadblock because, as we all know, modern flooring trends demand a flawless, perfectly flat foundation. So what do? Do you seriously have to rip out the entire concrete slab and start totally from scratch?
Okay, let's dive into this because this is the absolute core question, isn't it? Can you pour self-leveling concrete directly over that existing ugly concrete? The short, glorious answer is yes, absolutely. You do not need to tear up your home's foundation or hire an expensive crew with jackhammers. Pouring self-leveling concrete over an existing slab is a wildly popular, highly effective solution. It basically rescues your floors without the crazy intensive labor of traditional methods. It creates that perfectly flat base you need, completely revitalizing your space from the ground up.
Now, you might be wondering how that actually works. Well, the real magic here is the science behind the material. We aren't just talking about your standard, everyday driveway concrete. Self-leveling concrete is a specialized, polymer-modified mix. When you add water, it takes on a much more liquid consistency than traditional concrete. Because of those added chemical polymers, the mix gains incredible flowability and adhesion. You pour it, and it essentially does all the heavy lifting for you. Gravity literally takes over, pulling the liquid mixture down so it naturally settles into a beautifully flat, uniform layer, filling in all those annoying dips and low spots entirely on its own.
And because of that science, renovators absolutely love this stuff. The benefits are just immediate and massive. First off, fast installation. This material sets incredibly quickly, often letting you actually walk on it within just a few hours. That saves you an immense amount of time compared to traditional leveling. Secondly, it automatically delivers a flawlessly smooth finish. It's also super adaptable. You can use it to fix an uneven basement, smooth out a rough outdoor patio, or even correct settlement issues in older buildings. Finally, it acts as the ultimate compatible base, getting your floor perfectly prepped and ready for tile, laminate, or vinyl.
So how do we pull this off? Well, here is our masterclass blueprint for today. We'll assess the floor, tackle the golden rule of prep, move on to priming, execute the perfect pour, and finally look at how to avoid common mistakes. Let's kick things off with step 1, assessing the floor to find those hidden flaws. Before you buy a single bag of concrete, you have to play detective, because the success of this whole thing hinges on the stability of your base.
And part of that detective work means checking for the ultimate invisible enemy, moisture. Hidden moisture in your existing slab will absolutely ruin a new concrete overlay. So, to check for this, you're going to do a super simple 24-hour moisture test. Just tightly tape a piece of plastic sheeting straight to the concrete floor and leave it alone for 24 hours. When you come back and check underneath it, if you see any condensation at all, you have a moisture problem. And that is something that absolutely must be addressed before you even think about pouring.
All right, assuming your floor is sound and perfectly dry, we enter step 2, the golden rule, prep. This right here is where the real work actually happens.
The new compound desperately needs something to grip onto, right? You can't just pour it over a dirty or sealed floor and just kind of hope for the best. The surface must be meticulously cleaned, swept, vacuumed, and treated with a degreaser to strip away all the dirt, oil, and paint. But that's not all. Then you have to mechanically profile the surface. This means using a concrete grinder with a diamond-impregnated disc or maybe shot blasting for larger areas, just to create a slightly rough texture. Basically, if the old concrete is polished or sealed, this grinding process opens up the pores of the concrete, which guarantees the new layer can physically lock right into the old one.
Okay, so once your floor is clean and profiled, we reach step 3, priming. You can consider this your invisible shield.
Look at the crazy difference primer makes here. On a properly primed floor, the primer actually seals that porous concrete. This stops air bubbles from rising up out of the old slab and creating these ugly little pinholes in your brand new floor. But look at the unprimed side. If you skip this step, that dry, porous old concrete is just going to act like a giant sponge. It will suck the water right out of your wet self-leveling mix way too fast, and when that happens, your new concrete cures improperly, becomes weak, and inevitably cracks. Skipping primer is just a guaranteed way to ruin your project and waste your money. So always apply it evenly and let it dry exactly according to the manufacturer's instructions.
All right, the methodical prep work is finally done. Step 4, the perfect pour. It is officially go time. Now the pace completely shifts here.
You need to be fast, efficient, and totally prepared. To make sure you don't have to stop mid-pour, which by the way would totally ruin your seamless finish, you absolutely must have your essential tools laid out and ready to go. You're going to need a gauge rake to spread the material to a consistent thickness. You definitely need a spiked roller to go over the wet compound and release any trapped air bubbles. Spiked shoes are an absolute lifesaver. They actually let you walk out onto the wet surface without leaving footprints or ruining your level. And finally, a heavy-duty drill with a mixing paddle to guarantee a smooth, lump-free mix. Having these tools completely ready is half the battle. Because here is the stressful reality of the pour. 20 minutes. You generally only have about a 20-minute working window to pour and spread the material once the concrete is mixed with water. It sets quickly so the clock starts ticking the literal second that paddle starts spinning. You mix only what you can confidently pour and spread within that tight 20-minute time frame.
And when it comes to actually mixing, you kind of need to think like a baker. This sequence is absolutely critical. You always add your pre-measured water into the large mixing bucket first. Then, you gradually add the dry concrete powder into the water while mixing with your drill paddle. If you've ever baked a cake, you know exactly why. If you put powder in first and just dump water on top, you're going to get dry, unmixed pockets at the bottom and a lumpy, unusable disaster of a mix. Water first, powder second, every single time.
Now for the physical choreography of the pour itself. You want to start at the corner of the room that's furthest from your exit. And yes, please make sure you don't literally paint yourself into a corner here. Pour the mixture in strips across the floor. Use your gauge rake to guide the material into the corners and make sure you have a uniform thickness. Immediately after spreading, walk out in your spiked shoes and run that spiked roller over the wet surface to pop those bubbles. You've got to work quickly, keeping a wet edge so that each new batch you pour seamlessly blends into the previous one before it even starts to set.
And finally, step 5, avoiding mistakes. This is basically the autopsy of a failure, so let's look at why things go wrong. One crucial number to remember here is 1. Most standard self-leveling concrete products can only be poured from a feather edge up to a maximum of 1 inch thick in a single application. A really major mistake people make is trying to fill a massive, deep dip all at once. Applying the product outside of its recommended thickness leads to major shrinkage, weakness, and aggressive cracking. If you need it thicker than 1 inch, you generally have to build it up in stages, letting each layer cure unless you've specifically gone out and bought a specialized deep pour product.
Another major pitfall comes from just completely ignoring environmental hazards. Let's look at some real-world physics. The source material specifically highlights places like Brisbane and Queensland to illustrate this point. In climates with notoriously high humidity and heat, the moisture in the air actually slows down the evaporation of water from your concrete mix. This drastically extends your curing timeline, leaving your floor vulnerable for way longer. But on the flip side, if you have strong drafts blowing across the wet concrete, it can dry the top surface entirely too fast, which leads to cracking. It's a balancing act. You have to monitor the surface, plan your pour for lower humidity days if you can, and manage that airflow.
So the crucial point to take away is perfectly summarized right here. The most common reason self-leveling concrete fails is poor preparation. If your old slab isn't meticulously clean, if it isn't structurally sound, if it has hidden moisture, and if it isn't properly primed, that beautiful new layer simply will not bond. It'll peel, it'll delaminate, and all of your hard work and fast-paced pouring will literally be for nothing. Prep is everything.
We've covered the chemistry, the rigorous prep work, the rapid-fire pour, and the most common mistakes. You now have the exact blueprint to dramatically transform any damaged slab into a flawless foundation. So I have to ask, are you ready to tackle that uneven floor yourself, or are you going to leave the spiked shoes and gauge rakes to the professionals? Whatever you decide, you now have the knowledge to do it right. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.